I'm going to show you how I make blanks for Magic Set Editor. It starts here at the first link in the description. This is the Wizards of the Coast card image gallery. Recently they've started uploading these in reasonably high quality, enough to make blanks. So I'm going to select the gallery, this one here. I have it already loaded here. And I'm going to select the card for which I'll make a blank. We'll settle on Italy. What I'm going to do is I'm going to right click, save image as, and I'm going to create a new empty folder where I'll save this image. Then I'm going to go at the bottom and change the language to another language, which will reload the gallery with a different version of the card. It's the exact same card, the only thing that changes is the text. So I'm going to save this image as well in the same folder that I saved the first one. And I'm going to do this for all the languages. Now some languages, like Korean here, don't have a gallery. If I try to select it, it just kicks me to this generic page here. That means there's no Korean variant of this card image gallery. So once I've saved all the different variants of the card, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this shady executable that you should absolutely not download from a stranger on the internet. Link in the description. So you download it, and what it does is it's going to remove the bulk of the text. So should have been downloaded here. Okay, so if you launch it, run anyway. I'm crazy, living on the edge. It's going to ask three things of you. It's going to ask the location of the folder where you just saved all the different images of the card. It's going to ask what color is the text that you want to remove. So on this card it's white. And then it's going to ask for a path to where it's going to save the result. So I think I have this at blankmaker /ixsalon/Italy. So then you press clean text boxes. It may give you error messages. Looks like this time everything worked fine. And so I have the result already loaded in GIMP. So the result's going to look like this. You can see most of the text is gone. So I'm just going to go over quickly to explain how that works. So if you look, this is the Japanese version. And if you zoom here and you look, for example, at these pixels here, what you're going to see is that on the English version they're white, but on the Japanese version they're not white. And so the Exe is going to know, well, you told me to remove white text, so for these pixels in particular, I'm going to keep the ones from the Japanese version since they're not white. And so for each pixel on the card, it's going to do this. And so that's going to magically remove all the text, well, almost all the text. You can see if I look at the result, there are still some parts where there's a little bit of white, and that's because all the images in the folder had text at that precise pixel, so there's no way of removing it. The way you solve that is by adding more images inside the folder, but you can't really decide how many images you got. You just work with what's in the Wizards gallery. And you have to take the images all from the exact same gallery, because if you take them from another gallery, even if it's the same frame, it'll be just ever so slightly different. You can see here, if I switch between the English and Japanese version, for example, look at these pixels here. If I switch between the two, these pixels do not change. They are exactly the same. The only thing that changes is the text. And so that's going to give very good results with the executable when it's going to clean it up. But if the frames are ever so slightly shifted, it's gonna look odd, because the executable is gonna sometimes take pixels from one of the frames, sometimes from the other, and it'll look like there are like two shadow copies of the card kind of blending together. So it's not gonna look right. Now you're gonna notice that there may be some artifacts like this that appear, and that's because on the original image, if we open it up here, there are some mana symbols, and the text inside the mana symbols is black. So when we tell the executable, oh, remove white text, it's gonna see black pixels, and it's gonna say, oh, it's black, so it's definitely not the text. So I'm gonna prefer these pixels, and that gives these artifacts where it constantly selected these pixels on all of the frames. So to remedy that, you have to open each of the images that you've downloaded and just like blur this with white. You just draw some white pixels on top, and so now the executable knows, oh well, these are white pixels, I'm not gonna use these pixels, I'll use pixels from another frame. And you have to do that on all the images that you downloaded, but honestly that's quicker than removing it manually from this mess. So the flavor bar often causes the same problem, so you'll have to like draw a white line on top of it, stuff like that. But all in all, you get pretty good results. If you look at this, almost all the text is gone. Generally, you get less good results than this. I got really lucky here. However, there are still some parts that are a little bit white, and so now we have to remove these manually. So the way we remove it is with GIMP's smudge tool. I'm just gonna say a few words about GIMP. So GIMP is free. I'll put a link in the description. It's an amazing program, but it's very hard to use. In fact, when you start using it, it's just downright infuriating. So the best advice I can give you is to learn the keyboard shortcuts, because everything you do in GIMP, you can see here there are layers. Every image has multiple layers. So everything you do, it only applies to the layer you've selected. So every time you do something, you have to select the correct layer. Then you select pixels, and everything you do only applies to the pixels you've selected. So that's another step. Every time you want to do something, you gotta make sure you selected the correct pixels. If every time you want to do this, you gotta go inside a menu and then a sub menu and try to find the good tool and then select the layer, you're gonna go mad. It's gonna take so much time. But if you learn the keyboard shortcuts, then everything just goes faster, and after a while it becomes muscle memory. So it just like, it frees your mental space, because you don't even have to think about selecting the correct layer. Your hands just do it automatically, right? So that's the best advice I can give you if you're starting out with GIMP, is just learn the keyboard shortcuts, and you can personalize all of them. So I have personalized some of them, so maybe they won't be the same as yours, but I'll try to announce all the shortcuts I'm using. Okay, so we're going to use the smudge tool. The smudge tool basically does this. Does exactly this. So the shortcut is S. I'm going to take it, and it has two properties that we're going to look: the size and the force. The size is pretty self-evident. It's just how much pixels are going to be smudged, and the force is by how much. So the force generally you don't modify it, just at the start. If you see that it's not smudging a lot, you can increase the force. The size, we're gonna constantly be shifting the size. I generally oscillate between 4 and 1. The smaller the size and the longer it's gonna take, because you'll be modifying a lot less pixels per stroke, but you generally get better results, so it's always a compromise. So if I click on this and then try to smudge it, you can see it's not looking great. Okay, if I click on something around it and try to smudge that on it, well, it's a little better, but still not great. So I'm gonna cancel that by pressing Ctrl Z. And what we're actually gonna do is, first we're gonna pick the rectangle select tool, shortcut R, and we're gonna select a rectangular region that's pretty close to the thing we wanna get rid of, so that it has basically the same color. And we're gonna copy it, paste it, it gets pasted to a new layer. Then press M to move it. M is the move tool. And we're gonna move it over the thing we want to get rid of. And then, since it's on a new layer, I now want to merge it to this layer. And to do that, the easiest way is to put my cursor just outside the selection. You can see there's a little anchor that appears. So when this little anchor is here, you just click, and now it's merged it to this layer. So you can see it disappeared. It looks pretty good. Sometimes it doesn't look good, and you can see the outlines of the rectangle you've pasted because it doesn't really have the same color, right? So you'll have like a column of dark pixels right next to a column of bright pixels, and so the human eye will catch that, right? And so that's where the smudge tool comes into play. I'm gonna select it, maybe make it a little smaller, and so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna smudge the edges of the rectangle that I've just pasted, just to make it blend in a little better. And also there were some other pixels that were a bit too light, right? And so if you look now, the thing basically disappeared. So that's what we're going to do with all these. When it's just like one pixel that seems a bit too light, you can basically just take a nearby pixel, copy it, paste it, move it over, anchor it, and that's basically enough, right? Or if these 2 pixels here, just take 2 pixels nearby, paste them on top. Alright, so then another problem will be the set symbol. Since you've taken all the cards from the same card image gallery, they'll all have the same set symbol, so this set symbol was not removed by the executable. And so we're basically going to have to remove it with the same techniques, except the problem is it's much more massive. So if I try to take a big region, copy it, paste it, and move it here, you can see that it's copied, right? The human eye is very good at seeing these patterns, and you can see this is exactly the same as this. So one trick you can do is, before you paste it, before you anchor it to a new layer, you press Shift plus R to rotate it. And you can rotate it by 180 degrees or 135, 225 are values that I get good results with. So I'll rotate it by 135 degrees. And so now you can see that it's hard to tell that it was copied from just this other portion. So now I'm going to anchor it, press M to get back to the move tool, put the cursor just on the edge of the selection and click to anchor it. But now you can see there's this big edge here. We can clearly see that something was pasted and it really doesn't look good. So again, we use the smudge tool. So S for smudge tool, and we're going to try to keep the features of the frame. So for example, you can see there's like this line of lighter pixels. So I'm going to try to prolong this. So I'm going to start at the bright pixel and then stroke towards the dark pixels, so it like continues this light patch. Same thing here. I'm gonna try to stroke it a little bit like that, right? And you see that the this edge that we had here basically almost disappeared. So we're gonna like continue smudging a bit, right, like that. And so this looks not too bad. If you start smudging a lot, then it's going to start looking blurry, because smudging is basically blurring the thing. And so if it starts becoming too blurry and you've got like a region that's nice and crisp with a lot of details because it was the original card, and then you got another blurry region next to it, it won't look good. So what you do in these cases is you just take another part of the image that you haven't modified, so it still has this high contrast pixels, and then you just paste it back to add some details and some contrast back to the blurred region, and then you again smudge it so it doesn't look bad, right? You just smudge the edges a tiny bit. Another thing you can do is you can exploit the symmetry of the card. So for example, this part here will look more or less like this part here. So I can, for example, come here and take a bit of this, copy it, and then move it over there and paste it. And normally should look more or less okay, right? See? Next problem is the power and toughness. So the power and toughness, we're going to have to extract it from the image and put it on its separate layer, because some cards have it, some cards don't, so we want to be able to toggle it at will. And so the way we do this is with the free select tool here with shortcut F, and basically this one allows you to define a path, and then it'll select everything that's in this path. So generally you want to select about 1 pixel's worth of black outline, right? And so I'll go and select like this, right? And which pixels you select, which pixels you don't select, that's not at all obvious, right? There's really no good answer. I just do it with a feeling, right? And well, you can be more careful. It'll take more time, or you can zoom out and be less careful like this. Generally, the way I do it is I do a first selection where I'm not that careful, like this, and then I do a second pass where once I've selected the thing, let's just finish this quickly, because I'm not actually doing this. I'm just doing it for illustration purposes. So once you're done, you've selected this. What you want to do is Control X to cut it, Control V, and then right click on the layer and you say to new layer, right? So now it's on its separate layer. So once I've done that, generally I'll just hide the background layer and do a second pass and like try to adjust. So like here, for example, maybe delete these 2 pixels so it looks more balanced here, right? Maybe this pixel here also needs to be deleted, and just go back around the thing and try to ameliorate it. So like here, for example, maybe copy these pixels, paste them there so it looks better. I don't know. So then the problem is that on the rest of the frame there's now this huge hole, right? And so sometimes we get lucky. In the card image gallery there'll be an example of a card that does not have the power and toughness box. So if that's the case, well, we'll take this part of the image and paste it here. But if you're not that lucky, then you got to get creative. So one thing you can do is select the other part of the card, right? And just paste it flipped. So I'm gonna copy it, paste it, then Shift F to select the flip tool, click on the thing to flip it horizontally, then M to select the move tool, move it here, and then more precisely align it, and then here align it horizontally. So now that I've done this, what I want to do is I want to right click to new layer, because I don't want to merge it down just yet, because I really don't want to paste anything more than I have to. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring back the parent toughness box, and I'm going to select it again, a bit wider this time. So like this. Doesn't need to be super careful this time. Just select it a bit wider. And then, so now these pixels inside are selected. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go Control I, which will invert the selection. So now the pixels that are selected are these pixels that are on the outside. And why am I selecting these pixels? Because I want to delete them from what I just pasted. Okay, so let's hide the parent toughness. You see now I have this thing that I've just pasted, but really I've pasted a huge rectangle, but really I just want this part to be pasted. So I'm going to delete the rest from this rectangle. So now that everything here is selected, I'm just going to press the delete key, and you can see that the only thing that's left is what's here. Okay, and that already looks a lot better. So now I can merge this down, and of course it's not going to look good at the seams. So again, we whip out the smudge tool, right? And we start going about it. So here there's like this shadow part that if I try to start smudging this, it's really not going to look good. So generally what I would do here is take this light part here and just paste it over the shadow part like that, and I'll have much better results if I try now smudging over this. So now I'm gonna start here and smudge from the left, right, trying to make purely horizontal movements, and you can see we're trying to create gradients where we before had abrupt edges. So for this top here, I noticed that these pixels here and these pixels here are about the same color. So I really want to bridge this gap, right? So these pixels are very different. So if I start smudging them, it's really not going to look that good, right? So undo that. Try to again paste this here like that, and now we can finish it off with a bit of smudge. And if you zoom out, now it kind of looks pretty good. That takes care of the power and toughness. Now we gotta delete this image here, because of course you want to be able to put your custom image. So you gotta identify the edges of the image. On this frame, it's not at all clear what the edges of the image are. Like this part here, is this part of the frame or is this part of the image? Not clear. I think it's part of the image. I think the boundary is right here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take the free select tool and create a path. And this path, again, like with the power and toughness, should basically go in the middle of this black outline, right? And so I'll do this like not very carefully, but just select this thing and then just delete that, right? And then little by little, I'm gonna go over the whole border and delete everything that's inside here, right? So if you look here, what the result you want generally is you want a 1 or 2 black pixel thick line that separates the frame from the image. Here I've removed too many black pixels, and so you have these like light pixels that are going to be in contact with the pixels from the image that the user will select, and that's generally not going to look good. However, if you have this this stark contrast here between the frame and the image that's made by these dark pixels, that's generally going to look better. So you want to leave a 1 or 2 pixel thick line around the edges. That's generally the best results I get. Okay, so then next problem is the border. So this border, this black border here, we actually want to remove it to then in MSE replace it with a border that will have a color that can be modified by the user, so they can make silver bordered card or a golden bordered card, etc. Now that's not super important, right? I don't think there's a lot of people who make silver bordered cards, especially on showcase frames like this, but I mean, MSE allows it, so why not do it? So to remove the border, I do it like this. So I take this tool here, the fuzzy select tool. This tool, how it works is you click on a pixel and it'll select all the pixels that have the same color that are adjacent, right? So you can see it automatically selected all these pixels but did not select these pixels. So you might ask, why didn't it select this pixel, for example? It's because this pixel isn't exactly the same black as this one. It's like ever so slightly brighter or something. And so to change this, you have this threshold here, which decides how different a pixel can be and still be selected. So if you have it at 0, it's only going to select the pixels that have the exact same color as the pixel you clicked on. But if I increase the threshold to like 18, you're going to see it selected more pixels, right? Now, the problem is that these pixels, we select them because we're going to want to delete them, right? But if I give too big of a threshold, then you can see that's even so big we can't even see. You can see the selection starts to bleed inside the frame, right? And we don't want that because when we delete it, it's not going to look good, right? So we have to play with this threshold here. Increase it, click, see. Okay, that's too much. Decrease it, 13, click. Okay, maybe we can do a little bit more. Maybe 15. Okay, 15 looks all right. Okay, and the way I actually do it is I use this to do an initial selection, and then I do a manual pass over everything. So I'll purposefully use a threshold that's a bit too big, so like 21, and then I will remove manually the things I don't want to be in the selection. So to do this, I use the rectangle select tool, and you can hold down shift. If you look at my cursor, when I hold down shift, there's a little plus sign that appears. That means that whatever I select will be added to the current selection instead of completely replacing it. And if I hold down the control key, you can see the little minus sign. It means whatever I select will be removed from the selection. So here I go over here. These pixels, I'd like them to be in the selection. So I'll press shift and select them. And you can see they've been added to the selection, right? And then these pixels inside the frame, I don't want them to be selected, so I'll press Control and remove them. Okay, and so now they're not part of the selection. These pixels as well, don't want them to be part of the selection that will be deleted. So then here, these maybe I do want them inside. These I want them like, and again, there's no real good answer as to which pixels should be selected, which should not. Oops. You can always, if you mistakenly change the selection, you can always press Control Z to get back the selection you had, right? Selections are something that's taken into account by the undo system of GIMP, right? So don't fear about losing your selection, because you can work hours on getting a good selection, right? That reminds me, I have not saved a single time since I started doing this, and you want to save a lot with GIMP, because GIMP has a tendency to crash. And also, GIMP is made of a ton of small little programs that are more or less independent of each other. And so what can happen is parts of GIMP can crash, but then it still looks like it's working, but there are things that won't work because they've silently crashed, right? And so it's just make sure you save very often. All right, so once we're done with that, we can delete. Okay, and now we got our border. So then you'll have other things to take care of. Generally, the stamp. Okay, so this you'll have to extract on another layer, just like we did for the power and toughness. And also generally the legend crown you'll have to extract on a separate layer. Some frames may have other things, like for example this transformation symbol, but that's less common. All right, so once you've done all this, you should have something like this, right? It's all nice and clean, right? Everything's taken care of. With the power and toughness, that's also all cleaned. And you might think that we're done, but actually we're only started, because this is only one color, and you need to do not 1, not 5, but 8 colors, because there are the 5 basic Magic the Gathering colors, and then you have gold, which is multicolor, you have colorless, and you have artifact frames, right? So basically all we've done, we gotta do it again 7 more times, right? But of course, there are things that we can leverage the work we've already done to not have to do again. So for example, I have deleted the image here. So what I can do is I can take the fuzzy select tool with a threshold of 0 and click here in the transparent pixels. So you can see now my selection has selected all the transparent pixels, right? And now I can go take another version of the card, right? This is like the same frame, but it's green and white. And I'm making sure I'm on this other layer with the green and white card, but I still have the same selection. So if I now press delete, it's gonna automatically delete the image from this other frame, right? So I don't have to do that all over again. I can just leverage what I've done. Same thing like with the border, right? Just click here to select the transparent pixels and then delete it, and we've got the border taken care of, right? So another thing you can do is you can shift the hue of a frame. So the hue is basically the color, so that it matches another frame. So for example, if we take a look at the set symbol here, on this frame I've removed it. So what I can do is I can look at this one, select it more or less. Don't have to be too careful here. Just select, take a wide selection, and then move to this layer here. Then copy the pixels from this layer. Then get back to this layer and paste the pixels, right? And so we don't want to merge them with the layer just yet. So I'm going to right click and click to new layer so that it's over here. And then what I can do is I go color, hue chroma, and this will allow me to shift the color of this layer, right? And so I can try to match the color of the thing that's behind. And here you have the chroma. The chroma is basically how vivid the color is. So if you have zero chroma, it's like black and white. If you have maximum chroma, it's like super fluorescent, right? So you try to change the chroma, and then the lightness, is it dark or is it bright? So you try to fiddle with these numbers to find a matching color. And one way to find these numbers is the following. So what you do is you select a pixel here, a pixel that's present on both layers. So for example, let's say this pixel here. Okay, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this color picker tool and click on the pixel, right? It gets stored here. I'm just going to store it in the backup. And then I'm going to move to the other layer and select this color, right? So now we know that we want to get from this red to this brown here. So I'm just going to double click here and it's going to open this color window here. And so we have these two colors here. Okay. And so if I click on the red one, it says here you have hue, chroma, and lightness. It says hue is at 41.2. Okay. This other one is at 86.4. So that means I have to increase the hue by 45. Okay. So I'll just write that down, plus 45 hue. Okay. And then I'll do the same thing with the chroma. Chroma is 26. We want to get it to 9.1. So that's minus 17 or something like that. Yeah. And then the lightness is at 17. And we want to get it to 38. So that's plus 21. Okay. So this will give me a good starting point. It's not going to be perfect, but it's a good starting point. So now we get back to the layer. Open this color hue chroma. I strongly recommend to define a shortcut. I know this is not the base shortcut, but this thing you use so frequently that you want to define a shortcut for it. And so now I wrote down, okay, hue plus 45, chroma minus 17, and it doesn't have to be exact. Anyway, it's not going to be perfect. And then lightness plus 21. It's not modifying the thing. What have I done? Yeah, okay. See, the problem is I have this little selection here, so it was only applying the changes to this small selection. That's GIMP, dude. When you start using GIMP, you go crazy with these things. Like you try to do something and nothing's happening. It's because you haven't selected the correct layer, or you have this small selection somewhere and it's only applying it to this single pixel. So to remedy that, I'll go Control A, click on GIMP to make sure it's focused. Control A, so now I have everything selected. Then get back to the hue, okay, plus 45. You can also double click here and just type in a number. Here minus 17, and here plus 21. Okay, so you see, well, it's not too bad, right? But you can see that it's not perfect, right? So so really, when you're trying to create a frame that already has a color that Wizards made, the hue shift method is really not great, right? You really don't get amazing result. You can see if I merge down and select everything, you kind of see it's really not good. But the hue shift tool is really super useful when you're trying to make a frame where Wizards never gave you an example, right? So for example, the artifact frames, most of the time, Wizards does not ever make a card that's an artifact that uses this showcase frame. So you just have to invent an artifact frame. And so to do that, this hue shifting dialog box is super useful. You generally want to start from a color that's very vivid, so like either the blue frame, the red frame, or the green frame, and then you want to hue shift it, right? So so that you get an artifact frame. Okay, artifact is generally gray, something bluish gray, something like that. And of course, if I just do it blindly, you can see that there are parts of the image that are hue shifted that should not be, right? Like this golden part here, it should be golden on all the cards, right? If you look, the red and the green frames have the same golden part, so you shouldn't hue shift this part of the frame, right? So you're gonna have to select carefully which parts of the frame, GIMP please, which parts of the frame you want to hue shift, which is going to take a lot of time because you're going to have to make a good selection, right? And again, there's generally no good answer as to which pixels should be selected, which pixels should not be selected. There are always pixels that you don't know. So yeah. So the last advice I'd like to give you, maybe I should start with that, is don't make blanks that have already been done, because it's such a time-consuming process that it's just such a waste of time. So when you want to make blanks, make sure to go on the forum, go in the Discord server, ask around if nobody's making currently these blanks, or if somebody has already made them. So yeah, these are my methods. If you yourself have some tips and tricks for me, please write them in the in the comments below. And yeah, that's all I got.